We begin with some breaking news from the House of Commons, where the Deputy Speaker has found that Speaker Greg Fergus did break the rules when partisan language was used last week in an ad for an event in his riding. Conservatives are now asking the House of Commons to vote to remove Fergus as Speaker.
The fact is that the Speaker has a very, very, very long history of partisan liberal political activity. Look, I've played a number of sports, and from time to time you get frustrated with the referee. Been there, done that. You know, sometimes when the call comes to your favor, you're happy, and when it doesn't, then of course you claim that they're favoring the other side. But this Speaker, I believe, has done it consistently in this House.
The CBC's Karina joins us now in the studio. Okay, so Karina, we heard the Conservatives there, but where are things at right now when it comes to the future of Greg Fergus?
Well, he actually seems safe because we just got word from the NDP that they would not be supporting this motion that Workington is putting forward to get the House to vote to remove him. So yes, the Conservatives in the bloc are on side. They've said they've lost confidence. Well, the Conservatives a long time ago, the bloc also. But if the NDP follow through with what they're saying, it doesn't look like Fergus is going to lose his job. But right now in the House, debate continues on this motion. So even though it doesn't seem to, at this point, upset the future of Greg Fergus as Speaker, it is holding up business in the House. Nothing can go forward that they want to get passed, and tick, 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 the end of month is coming soon. That business is all held up as long as they want to debate this motion, even if now the outcome of this motion is known.
Okay, this is an interesting thing because last week when this emerged that there had been an invitation for an event in the riding with the Speaker, and it was put on the Liberal Party of Canada's website and had some very partisan language in it, which the party says was an auto-populated script that put it there. It was not the words of the Speaker or his riding association, and they apologized for it. The NDP came out and said, look, this is a mistake. The party owes the Speaker an apology. But now that Chris D'Entremont, the Deputy Speaker's looked into it, they found that he in fact breached the rules. Whether it was deliberate or not, they say, to use the language of Parliament, it's a prima facie breach of privilege. So when you look at it, it's a clear breach of privilege. So where does this leave Fergus? I mean, the NDP may not be siding with the Conservatives this time, but this is yet another story about Greg Fergus being caught in a sticky situation.
Yeah, there does seem to be the events and the incidences adding up. You have to wonder how much room there is. We have another year and a half, or maybe a little bit less now, before the next election. To remain Speaker all that time, when in the short period that he's been Speaker, having the number of incidents, whether it's appearing in that video for the outgoing Ontario Liberal leader in his robes, we know that was a problem. Then that's where things really started, or the fundraiser for which he ended up having to pay a fine and apologize. And so it does seem to be adding up. You have to wonder, the next one, if there is a next one, how much more room is there for people to say, oh, well, it was a mistake, or we still have confidence in the Speaker? I mean, I can't imagine. It would have to be pretty egregious for the Liberals to drop their support of him. But you do wonder going forward how long he has to be very careful going forward, I think is what he must be realizing at this point.
Right. Okay, Karina, thank you so much. And as Karina said, they are trying to pass legislation. We see Gerard Deltel, the Conservatives, the debate is now suspended until they deal with this motion of privilege. Can't pass the budget, can't pass any of that legislation. So we'll see where this goes. That's the CBC's Karina Roman. Thanks so much. House Speaker Greg Fergus has run afoul of House rules yet again. The Deputy Speaker, Chris D'Entremont, has found that Speaker Greg Fergus did break the rules when partisan language was used last week in an ad for an event in his riding.
Clearly, it is in the interest of the whole House to resolve this particular matter quickly and with all due seriousness. And as a result, I find that a prima facie question of privilege exists in this case.
A summer event announcement for Fergus's constituents included this line: while Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives propose reckless policies that would risk our health, safety and pocketbooks, our Liberal team is focused on making life more affordable for Canadians. Now, the Liberal Party has apologized for inserting that line, but the Deputy Speaker is apparently not buying it, and that means all debate in the House stops until the privilege question is dealt with. And Gary, as you can see right here, as I'm streaming on my laptop, it's still going on. I mean, you worked for a House leader. It seems like the NDP are going to stay with Fergus on this. The Liberals are obviously going to stay with Fergus on this. Are you surprised he found a breach of privilege here, even though it was the party that says they put the language in and not the Speaker himself acting in a partisan way?
No, it doesn't surprise me because you still have to hold responsibility for these things. We've seen cases of privilege in the past where similar situations have arose, and they've the complaint is found to be an actual case of privilege. I'm thinking of both Greg Fergus and the Liberal Party here, and it reminds me of that Sideshow Bob episode where he keeps stepping on rakes,
yeah.
Except for the fact that it seems like the Speaker and the Liberal Party have placed the rakes there themselves, continuing to cause these issues. I think it's just one more example. I think, look, you've said how the parties are going to split on this. The reality is between now and the next election, I don't see a change in the speakership, but it just means that the House of Commons is becoming more and more polarized. And look, the language in that invite, if you are the nonpartisan speaker, are supposed to be, equal in your dealings, and you're accusing the opposition leader of all sorts of calumnies, then people are going to raise that.
Yeah, look, Karina, I think there's probably a consensus that if Speaker Fergus had actually put that language in himself and it was proof, he's fired immediately, right? Like, you just can't do that and be Speaker. The party says it did it, but he has to wear it and live with it, and now the Deputy Speaker has ruled against him. I mean, how tenable is this?
There's no question in anybody's mind, Liberal, Conservative, NDP bloc, or anywhere else, I don't think, that Greg Fergus as a person is somebody who is a fairly upstanding person of great integrity, but one who happens to have stepped on quite a few rakes, to use Gary's analogy. I think that in this case, what's interesting is, a finding of privilege means that members of Parliament and the House of Commons privilege has been breached, regardless of whether the person who is responsible for that intended to do that or not. And that's why I'm not necessarily surprised that we did see this finding. It doesn't imply or find that Greg Fergus himself was responsible, but regardless, the damage is done, right? It weakens the confidence that the House of Commons as a whole may have in the Speaker's ability to hold the House together and to rule impartially. It's rough, when you're in year 8 of a government and you're heading into your last year of before an election campaign. You want to avoid as many own goals as possible. And right now you're dealing with an own goal, and you've just now lost an entire day of your legislative agenda because of this privilege debate happening.
Yes, and they still haven't passed a lot of legislation, but it sounds like am I reading you right, that you think his continuation as Speaker is not a tenable situation? I mean, is it at that point in your view?
I would hope not, because I think a disruption and another selection of a new Speaker is probably more disruptive. I think what the House probably needs to hear at this point is from Speaker Fergus himself, not just in his conduct of day-to-day things, but about how he plans to not step on any additional rakes this session or in the next year.
Leah, the NDP want to keep giving them that chance, though. I mean, they don't mind the rake stepping, at least not these latest bits of it. I mean, the Bloc has said they'll vote no confidence every time they get a chance because they've lost confidence a long time ago. The Conservatives are not only willing to vote it, they're looking for reasons to have the votes. But the New Democrats are sticking with Greg Fergus. What do you make of that move?
I mean, it's the advice I would give. I've been in rooms where you're trying to decide, how much to push on a procedural issue and what that accomplishes in terms of your mandate and your goals for the electorate, as well as, political opportunities. And in this case, I think for the NDP, it makes more sense to maintain the status quo and focus on issues that they can, advocate on behalf of Canadians rather than something that is entirely internally focused. So I think it makes sense. I don't think it's a tacit approval of the behaviors. I think that those are pretty clear cut, that he has stepped on many rakes. It's my favorite Simpsons episode, so I love that reference. But it's not good politics to spend any time there.
Yeah, Rob, I got a text from the NDP saying they see this as the Conservatives is trying to tie up pharmacare and the other things they want on their agenda. They don't want supply and confidence to work. They don't want that stuff to get through, so they're not going to take the bait and give the Conservatives what they want. I mean, how do you think people see it?
I think they should see it in a couple of ways. First of all, the Liberals have lost some leverage about what they can bring in terms of legislation in the scant few weeks that are left before they recess for the summer. Number one, there's a practical effect that way. The other practical effect, I mean, we've referenced the sacred fire of wisdom when it comes to The Simpsons as political guidance. But I also think of Worldwide Wrestling Federation and Bobby the Brain Heenan, who liked a sneak flying head scissors from time to time against his opponents. What the practical effect of all of this is the unruliness that we've seen in the House of Commons, which is unedifying, as well as, I think, unproductive, unfruitful for all sides, is only going to get worse. As long as Mr. Fergus is there, he is contested by a large swath of the people in the House of Commons. It just guarantees us that the toxicity is going to get worse. It's going to endure.
Gary, I'm being informed that the Gen Z on the team have no idea about this Simpsons reference of Sideshow Bob stepping on the rake. It has to do with an episode where Kelsey Grammer plays Sideshow Bob. Look for the meme, Sideshow Bob and rakes. But despite having to educate the millennials and the Gen Zs on the team, this does speak to Rob's point, the toxicity inside Parliament and the inability to make things work. Some of that, the Liberals will tell you, is a feature of the style and approach that Pierre Poilievre has brought in there since he's been leader. The Conservatives will say it's a failure of judgment and ethics by the Liberals that have led to this. And others just say it's year 9. It's a minority parliament and it's just pure chaos. But there is legislation sitting there that isn't moving because everything is grinding down.
And important financial legislation, the Budget Implementation Act, the Fall Economic Update for last year has still not passed Parliament. And I have not understood the government's lackadaisical approach to managing important House business, because you think you control the agenda and you have a situation like this where you're going to lose an entire day and maybe more when 4 weeks to go of silly season and people want to get out of here, and you're going to lose control of your own agenda. And that itself is a real indictment on your management of the House.
So, Karine, though that is a criticism of this government, its inability, ambition is great, inspiration seems fine, it's execution and perspiration where they struggle. And I know they don't have a majority, but they kind of have a functioning majority with the NDP, right? And if you want to, you can get this stuff through. They did get the anti-replacement worker legislation through today with the Conservatives voting against it. But at a certain point, don't they need to put their foot on the gas and just ram this stuff through using the confidence and supply agreement to get it into force?
Even with a large majority in the House of Commons, there are tools available to opposition parties to delay and to slow these down. Pierre Poilievre and the Conservative Party have made excellent use of those tools over the last number of years. I only need to think back to Christmas when there was a big push made to, we're going to stay in the House of Commons over Christmas and Santa's going to come and fill your stockings overnight right here in Ottawa because...
Which nobody really believed, and it didn't actually happen. It was a good marketing ploy.
But it was, and they probably raised a lot of money off of it. But, here we are again. Things are moving slowly. A lot of that is due to things like introducing superfluous amendments that are only intended to filibuster. I suspect we will see more of that. That being said, though, David, we are into now last week of May. This is potentially the last summer before Parliament is dissolved for an election. All of these MPs really want to hit that barbecue circuit. They want to be going and spending time with their constituents, with local business people, going to community events. The pressure to get out of Ottawa is also pretty high.
But Rob, that benefits the Conservatives, doesn't it? Because Pierre Poilievre can just leave his caucus there and go. That's what he's done on a lot of these filibusters. Mm-hmm. I don't say I have to criticize him, but he's called a filibuster, said he'd stay, and then he went to fundraisers and went to events. He can do that, but if you're the government, you're stuck, right? You have to stay there. So that benefits the Conservatives in this dynamic.
Yeah,
right?
And so does the notion of the party having to apologize to the Speaker for something that it did. What that does is it reinforces the notion that we're in the fin de regime days, that there's a sense that the government is in disarray when that happens. When you have to have the party apologizing for the Speaker who's already been in some hot water, it isn't a good look for a government that is going into the end of its first decade in office and asking people to send it into a second decade.
Leah, final word from you.
Well, my advice always to politicians is if Gen Z and younger millennials didn't understand the Simpsons reference, they're certainly not watching the proceedings of the House. Get out of the House. don't spend your energy there. Focus on speaking to voters, getting your message out. Eventually, with the support of the NDP, they will pass these measures. If they need to let the Conservatives tire themselves out with delays and protests, then let them do it. But focus your attention on the things that voters are actually paying attention to.
Okay, so for the young people on my team, I'm going to fire up my Disney Plus subscription, and we're going to watch Cape Fear, The Simpsons Season 5, Episode 2, and you're going to watch this and understand it, because it's an excellent piece of pop culture that I'm glad Gary watches, and he brought
Here
it
to
up.
help and educate the young folks.
Yeah, he's our appeal to the youth audience here. All right, we're going to say goodbye to the Power Panel. Thank you all, gang. Leah Ward, Gary Keller, Carleen Bryan, and Rob Russo. Thanks so much.